Visual storytelling is very important to me. With my South and East LA project, I was all about exaggerating design cues and taking undertones and turning them into overtones. And I'm aware the real-life areas that inspired me don't look quite this bad in actuality, and the bad neighborhoods in LA County are known for being somewhat presentable, at least compared to other places, but here, it's all about telling a story. It's not about what's happening in a scene, but what's already happened. It's showing history through a gritty filter in the life that's there now. Somewhere down the line, the storytelling started coming from the graffiti.
Solo, bumping in the blazer, clowning on the car phone, blowing up my pager. What's up is on the set, just checking out the scenery. Brothers I ain't never met is hitting me up. I had to swallow my pride.
The graffiti I created was all inspired by real-life gangs learned through music I started listening to in the 90s. And this was all relatively recently, back in mid-2020, when I learned how to create my own props. And it unlocked a whole new level of presentation for me. I'm both sad and happy to say this iteration of my project is officially retired. I spent too much time redoing everything over the course of years that it just doesn't, I don't have it in me anymore to continue. And I'll remake it all again someday, maybe when we see a Cities Skylines too. But until then, I've progressed into a new style of storytelling in a different location. And so far, I think it's my best work yet. Who the fuck knows where in Arizona Medina is supposed to be? All I know is it's dead, or just about there, barely hanging on. It's a ghost town that hasn't realized it died. But hey, there's a dairy dip. Medina is just another who gives a shit town on a highway to someplace more interesting. And other places in Palador County exist, but we can't go there yet. It's not really a town, it's a husk of one, or someone's forgotten memory. This is the truest definition of grit I've created to date, but it does have one thing going for it: the views. The enormous satellite dish's purpose is to look cool. Nothing relevant to the backdrop goes on up there, but it's complemented by the undeniable beauty of the canyon. So you might be standing in a hellhole, but if you look up high enough, you'll see something very pretty. I chose arid rocks over the typical red or brown because it looks unique and more original, but my plan is to stylize other areas with different vegetation and terrain. So what's being shown now is one biome of several others. Entertainment-wise, aside from the strip club, there's Santana's, the type of dive bar where everyone knows but doesn't like each other and prefer to drink alone in the shadows. It occurred to me recently that there's no windows. And then across the street is the gun store and shooting range. America, right? The fuck out of here with that. If you want to stay protected, you gotta pack heat. And to a European, it sounds outrageous, but to people in AZ, if everyone else can kill you with a gun, why wouldn't you have one too? Look at this shithole. The true scale of the build won't be fully shown because for the sake of longevity, I want to come back now and again to show a little more and some subtle updates I wasn't able to get through on my first run through the design process. But even if that wasn't my intention, I detailed every little inch of the landscape because I didn't want to create just another set piece that's only viewable from one angle. To get into the full spirit of the tone I'm shooting for, I fully immersed myself into the build for my own sake, meaning that despite the fact there will be so many different fully detailed things you'll never see, completing it on my end puts me in tune with the series as a whole. Let us not forget my lust for rundown power lines. The theme here has always been about aesthetics, but efficiency too. So half of these poles might be a serious environmental safety hazard, but if they still work and distribute power, then it's fine. If it's not broke, then you don't fix it. You know the saying. Medina's remaining commercial buildings are deteriorating, so aside from the Shell station, there's nothing recognizable from the lives most of us live. And what makes up the economy in the wake of commercial failure are industrial properties. Something that's been inspired by me looking at gritty places like this in real life, marveling at the fact that these nondescript businesses are actually functioning and making money somehow. You see a lot of places in rural areas that just exist. You know, the sun rises and sets the same as anywhere else, but it feels cut off, isolated. You know, with towns that have been occupied solely by the same families through generations. And the lens the locals see the mainstream world through isn't that much different than how someone from a third world country views New York City. It's different. It has a different vibrance to it. And there's nothing for anyone in Medina, and it's a lot worse than it seems. The looming of nightfall is to be feared, because that's when people go missing. The backstory to By Night and the reason why these towns have crumbled is owed to strings of disappearances that have periodically taken place over the course of decades. No one gets murdered, they just vanish. And that simple premise, the mystery behind it and the sense of not knowing is very powerful to me, because when I think about tragedy, the only thing that can truly mitigate it is closure. But without it, time can't fully heal that wound. The scar fades, but it never quite loses its stain. Unanswered questions are painful, and unanswered questions that feel like your life depends on them are even worse. And if you don't give a human being a chance to mourn, then you're breaking them indefinitely until they get the opportunity. When it's getting dark, residents know what's coming. It's the first thing they think about in the morning daylight. They can't be at ease during the time they feel safest. All they can think about is what's coming when the sun is going down. The artistic nature of By Night is to show how the tone of a single location can be transformed through lighting and sound design. It's very much about perspective, how the mind's eye warps what you take in based on how you're feeling in that moment. So for these people, their perspective has long since been corroded by fear and tragedy. The night is a presence, an entity, something that has the power to control everything and exerts its influence onto. And it's entirely inevitable. For people in Palador County, it carries with it its own folklore, because without any real suspect or explanation for how people seemingly vanish out of thin air, the only fear is the darkness itself. It's all they have to blame, and in that respect, the real culprit kidnapping people is irrelevant. It's not who, it's when. Stylistically, the use of orange lighting, or sodium vapor if we're going to be technical, is an homage to old OpenGL games I played like Quake when I was a kid. I used to load up an empty multiplayer map lit up by orange invisible light sources, like almost metallic in a way, but I was alone, completely isolated, and that's what this is supposed to feel like. But the difference here, despite that feeling, there is something there. It's not visible. It's only something you can feel. Many people have disappeared. I fully respect that. If this was a real life situation, the FBI would have been all over this from jump. But this ain't fucking reality. This is a nightmare. Capitalizing on it is a private investigator, a sort of community leader who won over the hearts of the people and is at the forefront of the investigation. The police exist, but have long since let the community down. In their place, the PI sends out his own street teams to do their own research and make those affected feel at ease. And this is who residents rely on. But note, the owner drives a Bentley. So it begs the question whether or not he's an opportunist, preying on the desperate, or actually helping people. Or could it be both? See, I'm fascinated by the question of, is something a bad deed if it has a positive outcome? That's a good question. I want to talk about inspiration now to break the suspense and give some insight into what's going on. What I find fascinating these days is younger people's infatuation with serial killers and Netflix murder documentaries. And this has always been an industry, but now it's bigger than before. I don't have a problem with it as long as it's being decent. But a big part of me has to consider that real families and lives have been affected by what's now being used for entertainment. And we can consider the ethics and intent behind it as much as we want, but the fact remains that every single time one of these documentaries is glorified so people can pass time, someone somewhere is affected. And the other side, and what the first point leads into, the most important part, are conspiracy theorists and malicious trolls that seek to abuse these people for fun. In Palador County, a lot of the things that you see, like graffiti and sabotage billboards, most likely do not come from the person or people responsible for the disappearances. It comes from sadistic tourists who are attracted to this area because it's a cultural phenomenon. They're the same people that obsess over people's suffering, just the interactive antisocial variety. They exist in real life. You know who I'm referring to. And it's affecting real people's lives. Like the families of people I see when the reality becomes pop culture for others. The atmosphere is designed to be viewed only from the perspective of Palador residents. This is their reality. You know, in life, you can get trapped in a mental state that's beyond your control. You feel like the narrator to your own suffering. And that's depression. You can't escape. That's what this is supposed to feel like. Don't worry, I won't leave you hanging. On another side of the mountain, the Dayton side, a place we haven't been to, there's a path that goes up it, past the satellite dish. It's a place no one goes. And there's a cave at the end of it that contains a place of worship. You've seen allusions to it watching you, not she or he, but a presence. And it's in there.